Thanks for everyone that's joining. As you know, we've got the Maven Coffee Challenge running right now. And the idea for this live stream, it's funny, we've already had some discussion around this data set, but it's on the idea of analyzing multiple select questions from survey results, which I think is a very interesting topic and one that can become surprisingly easy to tackle using, in this case, I'm going to use Power Query and Excel, but you can use Power BI as well. And I'm sure you can use the same in Tableau, though I haven't gotten that far in my Tableau learning journey yet. But if we start taking a look at the challenge here, you'll see that we want to analyze survey results to craft a data-driven strategy for opening a new coffee shop. We've got this great data set here that's from using real survey responses from a taste test of about 4,000 Americans that was conducted by YouTube coffee expert James Hoffman in a partnership with Cometeer. And if we take a look and preview the data here, you will see that we have some multiple selection questions, right? We've got the where do you typically drink coffee? And the answer choices for that multiple select were none of these, at home, at a cafe, on the go. I forget what that last one is, but the idea is that the survey respondents could click on one or none or as many of these as they wanted to. So it becomes a little bit harder to analyze in a simple, pivot table format, which is what I typically like to do when I'm getting started with an ad hoc analysis like this one. Now I am going to get started, but don't worry, you will be able to rewatch this later on from the Maven page. So let's get started. I'm just going to download the data set here. Let's open this up. And let me just extract these. And let's open up, this is the question key that we were just looking at. I'm just going to open up the survey results. Again, in Excel, you'll see that each row, we've got about 4,000 row represents a survey respondent. Thanks, Chris. And then you've got the different questions in each one of these columns, right? So for the simple questions, the non-multiple select questions, it's very simple. What is your age? Well, for this person, it's between 18 and 24. This one is 25 to 35. And then as we get to the multiple select questions, you'll see that at first we do have them all conglomerated. So this person drinks at a cafe, at the office, at home, or on the go. And then you can see it break it down by each one of the multiple select options. So in this case, since they selected these four, then these four are true. This person here only selected at a cafe, so the only one that is true is at a cafe here. So again, with simple, single table analysis, I always like to start by just creating a pivot table and see what I can learn. So if I just go to Insert, Pivot Table, let's add one here. And if we were just try to take a look at the distribution by age maybe, let's sort these. Grab this one, move it down here. Maybe get rid of the blanks. And let's just take a look at the count of submission IDs, since we know each submission ID is a person. So we can start to get an idea of the distribution here. We can maybe show it as % of column total. And if we wanted to get a little bit fancier with it, we can add some data bars just so we can take a look at the distribution. And when I do it for percentages, I like to go from 0 to 1, which is the 100%, just so that we get a little bit of a better idea. So that works really well. Now the problem though is that if I do it for where do you typically drink coffee instead, which is one of my multiple select options, now it becomes a lot harder, right? We can take a look at the percentages. You'll see that a lot of people, 40% just selected at home, which is fair enough, but these people also selected at home. So instead of trying to see the distribution, of the people that chose groups of selections, I want to see, how many people clicked at home regardless of the other selections they made, and the same for the rest of the selections. So this is where, the trick that we're going to walk through comes in, and I like to do it using Power Query and unpivoting the data using a similar approach to the one that Gerard showcased in his video. I think it was either earlier this week or last week. So to do that, I'm actually going to open a new workbook. Let me close the previous one. I'm not going to save. And let's get the data from that file. So from text CSV, let me just go to my file. Let's import it into Power Query. And let's transform this. Let me move my Power Query window in here. Whoops. All right, so we've got our data. Let's call this standard questions. And from those people that do follow Gerard and do follow Yasmin as well, you may have noticed that even though it looks like our submission IDs here are distinct values, so let me actually show for the entire data set. We've got 4,042 values and they're all distinct. There are some duplicates that come with the different capitalization. So they have the same characters, but some are capitalized, some aren't. I'm not going to go into that. All I'm going to do is just add an index column. Let me move that to the beginning. And let's just use that as our key instead. So let's make this text. And I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to use this second table for my multiple select questions. Now, if I go back to my standard questions, I'm going to remove all of the multiple select questions from here. And a quick way to do that is just go to Home. Let's choose columns. And I wish it let you resize this. I don't think it does. Maybe it does in Power BI, but we can just uncheck the ones that we know are part of the true false multiple select, which is really everything that has a parenthesis. So I can just use my arrows and my space bar to start deselecting those. Let's continue to do that. Looks like it's these, these, I think so, yep. I'm just going to continue to click through to only keep the ones that aren't multiple select in our standard questions table. All right, we're on the right track here. Okay. So we've got our standard questions all lined up. I still want to keep these for reference, just so I know if I wanted to look at it in a single column, what each person selected, I can. But now let's go to our multiple select questions. And I'm actually going to do the opposite here. So I'm only going to keep those true false ones. So let's go to choose. Again, let's choose. And now I'm going to keep the index and the rest of them. I'm actually going to keep the submission ID too, just so I can show you how that relationship doesn't work for some reason once you try to model it in Power Query. So let's keep these parentheses. Again, I'm just selecting the multiple select options one, the columns here. And I think we're good. So if I press OK, I've got my index, my submission ID, and the rest of these should all be true false columns. And it looks like that is correct. There's a few here that aren't, but I just know that in the data set, the ones that were for the flavorings, in the server, they actually didn't render whatsoever. So there's no answers anywhere here. That's why these are all just completely blank. But that's okay for now. So we've got our index and submission IDs. We only need one that's going to be our key. And we've got our multiple select options here. Now all I need to do is select these, go to transform, and just like Gerard did, let's unpivot the other columns. And as I do that, you'll see that now we've got duplicate indexes here. This represents our first person. And if you look at the first person, first question, so do you usually add anything to your coffee? We've got the different answer choices, and it looks like this one. Selected only true for no, just black. So if we go back to our standard questions, this person, let's go over to that question. No, just black. Our second person selected sugar or sweetener and no, just black. Let's confirm that here. Person number one. And we've got no, just black, true. Sugar or sweetener, true. The rest are false. So we're displaying the same information, but now we have it in a structure that lends itself to analyzing with a pivot table. And I can actually just convert these to, actually first let me get rid of anything that isn't true or false. Those are rows that are adding no value here. And then let's just convert these to whole numbers instead, so that we can use things like an average or a sum to calculate the number of people that answered yes, or the percentage of people that answered yes. Let's just change that. You'll see the trues become a 1, the falses become a 0. And the great thing about this data set is that we have both the question and the answer choice within this attribute field. They were all part of the column header. So we can do that to split this up into a question column and into an answer choice column. So let's do that. Let's go to transform, split the column, and we want to split at the space and the open parentheses. So let's do by delimiter custom space open parentheses, and we can just do at the leftmost. Press OK. You'll see that we've got the questions here now. We can confirm. And we've got the answer choices here. Now let me remove that final parentheses, text before delimiter. And we want to go from right to left on this one, so from the end. Press OK. I'm just going to trim to make sure I don't have any leading or trailing spaces as well. Let's do that. And now we've got our index, our submission ID. This is the question from our multiple select questions. This is the answer choice, and this is the answer for this particular person, this particular question, and this answer choice. Did they select it or not? And that's all we need to do in Power Query for this. So now I'm going to go to Home, Close and Load. Let's close and load too. I'm only going to create the connection, add this to our data model. And let's just wait for that to load. We've got our 4,000 rows loaded for our standard. Let's call it a lookup table here, but it also contains some of the other questions. And then once we've unpivoted, we've got about 120,000 rows for our multiple select questions. So if we go to Power Query, Manage, we can go into our diagram view here. And we've got our two tables that we can join. And here's the interesting part. You notice that the submission ID field again had 4,042 distinct values, but if I try to join, it won't let me because it's assuming that it's creating a many-to-many relationship. Again, this is due to the capitalization issue that was creating weird duplicates that Gerard mentioned in his video. I highly encourage you to take a look at that. But no worries, that's why we created our index key. Let's just join using that. And now we've got our one-to-many relationship. So that's perfect. Let's go back to Excel. And let's go and create a pivot table from our data model. And again, we can still do the same analysis that we were doing before. So for example, we can say, what is your age? And let's just count the indexes. And we've got those same values as before. We wanted to take a look at them, but let's not do that. Let's take a look at our multiple select questions. I'm going to add the question here to the filters. So the first one that we wanted to take a look at last time was, I think it was, where do you typically drink coffee? And so I'm going to select that question. We can display the answer choices here. So now we just have the unique answer choices at a cafe, at home, at the office. None of these are on the go. I'm going to add the answer to the column. So this is answered no or didn't check that option. 1 is did check that option. Let me actually change this to outline form and remove our totals. And now, if we go count those indexes, let's show as percent of row total. So for the option at a cafe, 29% people selected it. So that gives us some insight into that. For at home, 91% of the people selected it. For at the office, 35% of the people selected it. So that's very useful. Let me actually go to number format, remove the decimal places. But we don't really need to look at this. We just need this. And to do that, right now we're using what are called implicit measures, but we can create explicit DAX measures for our model. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new measure in our multiple select questions. Let's call it percent of respondents. And the great thing about this, since we know 1 means answered yes and 0 means answered no, if we just calculate the average, then we get the percent of people that answered yes. So average of the multiple selecting questions answer, let's calculate this as a percentage, no decimal places. Press OK. Let me get rid of that here. So we're still looking at this. Let me copy it, paste it over here, get rid of these, and let's just add our new measure. And would you look at that? We have these same exact values. So we don't need these anymore. Just bring this up here. And let me get ahead of myself here and remove auto fit column widths on update. And the great thing is we can do the same thing for all of these questions now. Maybe we can order by percent of respondents. So where do you typically purchase coffee on the go? 61% go to specialty coffee shops, 54% go to local cafes. And again, you may be wondering why these don't add up to 100. In this case, it's 185. It's because these are multiple select questions, right? So you can have people select more than one, but you get an idea of how many people selected each one. So that's very useful. We could even get rid of this. Let me just add a slicer for the question here. And we can use this instead of this filter here. So let's get rid of that. And now we can take a look at these options. We could even go ahead and add those data bars again. Let's go for answer choice. Again, let's manage so that they go from 0 to 100%. Yes, I can relate very closely to Jasmine as well, Marianne. Let me press OK. And now we should take a look at that. Take a look at all of our question choices and analyze them with a simple pivot table. And the great thing about using this and the data model as well is that we can break these down by using some of the components from the other standard questions, right? So maybe we want to take a look at this, filter by age. So let's only take a look at, our 25 to 34 segment. You'll see that we can break it down like that because we're taking advantage of Excel's data model. Let's select all of them. And maybe we can go back and maybe analyze these and see if they change based on something like, coffee expertise. That's one of our other standard questions. I'm just going to move this to my columns, this to my rows. Let me resize these a bit. So now we can see, okay, as coffee expertise rises, or this is, perceived of your own, interpretation of your coffee expertise. So as people think that they are, greater coffee connoisseurs, maybe they tend to use more pour over techniques, more espresso techniques, and they use less coffee brewing machines, which is very interesting. Where do these people typically drink coffee? It looks like in the 1 to 3s, maybe not so much at home. As we start to get closer to that 10, more people drink at home. Let's see, do you usually add anything? This is another interesting one. Well, as people have a higher expertise, they tend to prefer just simple black coffee, and the opposite happens with adding milk or sugar or any types of syrups. It looks like the people with the least coffee expertise prefer to add that to their coffee. So this is just some of the analyses that become very simple to do with what is now just a pivot table if you use that technique of unpivoting those multiple select options using Power Query, and then just model your data set like that. And that's really all I had. I don't know if anyone has any questions, if anyone tried similar approaches. I'm curious to hear your thoughts under 18. But yeah, this is one way of working through the data and creating that ad hoc analysis that will let you start preparing the eventual report that you'll need for the challenge. If we go back to the challenge page here, that's how we can analyze these survey results and start putting together that data-driven strategy. I hope everyone here has either participated already, and we can see their entries here, or is interested in participating. Again, we've still got a few more days. If you want to take some time over the weekend to put together an entry, maybe now it's easier for you to do so just by using Excel.